A bit earlier, President Reagan, shots were fired at President Reagan this afternoon within the past 25 minutes or so as he left a speaking engagement at a Washington hotel. By all accounts, the president was not hurt. We have received videotape from the hotel where the president was emerging. You are watching it for the first time, as I am.
Mr. President!
There you saw what happened, the crowd calling to the president as he emerged from the Washington Hilton Hotel. The sound of gunfire. According to some eyewitnesses there were 3 to 5 shots. And some people fell, but the president, as you saw, was immediately hustled into his limousine, which our camera does not show at the moment. It immediately sped away. We are told that some people in the area were injured, and that seems clear from these pictures which we have just received. But again, we are told that the president himself was not hurt. This occurred within the past 30 minutes in downtown Washington. The president had been addressing a meeting of the AFL-CIO at a hotel in Washington. The shots were fired, as you saw, after the president emerged from the hotel and waved to the crowd, which was calling to him. Scene of considerable confusion and concern there. But once again, to repeat, by all accounts, the president was not injured. This has been a special report from CBS News. As soon as there are more details available to us, we'll make them available to you. I'm Richard Roth in Washington.
This has been a CBS News special report.
We should point out that that gentleman on the left side of the screen that you see with the small automatic weapon is a member of the security detail, and it has nothing to do with the assailant other than at this moment trying to protect the assailant and the other officers. By the time this videotape was taken, President Reagan had been rushed away from the scene. What is happening here is the security men have the assailant, are holding him down, and are administering to the wounded. 3 persons in the presidential party wounded. Press Secretary Jim Brady and, as I say, the other 2 persons believed to be a policeman and a Secret Service officer. No identifications as yet. All of this happened a short while ago outside the Washington Hilton Hotel. By the time these scenes took place, the president was long gone and unscathed, except possibly for what was described by White House spokesman Larry Speaks as a bump when the president went to the sidewalk, down on the sidewalk immediately upon hearing the shots. I want to emphasize that we are in the early stages of reporting this story, and while it is believed that the 3 wounded persons are Jim Brady, the White House press secretary, that much seems assured. That the identities on the other 2 wounded persons are tentative. One believed to be a Washington policeman, the other Secret Service agent. This Jim Brady, who seems to have a head wound, not seems to have, does have a head wound, but it's unclear from this videotape whether that head wound was suffered as he hit the pavement or is from a gunshot wound. The condition of White House Press Secretary Brady and the other 2 persons injured by the gunfire outside the Washington Hilton Hotel as an unsuccessful attack was made on President Reagan, the president unhurt. The conditions of the 3 persons who were injured by the gunfire unknown at this time.
Yeah, we should point out that it's Richard Roth again in Washington. Mike Deaver, the Jed, you know better than I, the Deputy Chief of Staff, I believe, was in that group that we saw emerging from the hotel, and at one point it looked as if he might have been hurt in some way. We have received word now that that he was not.
He's right in the picture that we'll see in a little while. The slow motion repeat, you'll see Deaver right in front of Brady or right beside Brady, and as the shots are fired, Brady leaves the frame, so to speak, is out of the picture, and Deaver then disappears from the picture, but it looks as if he's not hurt.
For those of you who may know Washington, this was the side or so-called ballroom entrance to the Washington Hilton Hotel. There are two Hilton hotels in Washington. This is the one which is on, well, Washingtonians would describe it as being on top of the hill on Connecticut Avenue, not the Hilton Hotel closest to the White House. The President had gone there to make an address, and as he came out, having made that address, he came out the side entrance of the Washington Hilton Hotel. Small crowd had gathered there. You saw, those of you who saw the videotape, that remarkable videotape taken by our CBS crewmen, Charlie Wilson and Norm Stein. The President waved a bit. Then at least 3 shots were fired, possibly as many as 5 from just to the right of the President. We're told that the shots were fired from just off to his right at a range of about 10 feet. According to those at the scene, the shots were fired at a range of about 10 feet.
That's Mike Deaver in the very front, now moving to the back of the car.
And what a job that Secret Service man did by knocking the President, as was the Secret Service man's job, knocking the President down and actually into the limousine, instead of, we thought initially, he'd been knocked to the pavement. The President by this time has been knocked into his limousine by that courageous Secret Service man, name unknown. Jim Brady, the White House press secretary, has been hit. You'll see him just at the base of your screen. The assailant is being wrestled against the wall to the right of your screen, although there's a man with a gun drawn to your right of screen who is not the assailant. He's another security man, and you could see yet another security man sort of held his wrist as if to say, don't fire a shot, everything's under control. The President has been driven away by this time. 3 people are injured. Press Secretary Jim Brady and 2 others believed to be a policeman and a Secret Service man. Let this replay of the videotape play for a few moments here. The assailant pinned by policemen and security men at this point. No identification of who the assailant is, nor why he would fire shots at the President. There's no indication that there was anyone else involved other than the single assailant, which is not to say that there could not have been someone else involved, but there's no indication that anyone other than the single assailant was involved. Weapon used is unknown, although those who were at the scene seem to be in agreement that it was a handgun of some sort. The assailant being held under a human body pile of officers, and the scene secured by other officers who have their weapons drawn, including at least 1 small automatic machine gun. Press Secretary Jim Brady face down on the cement with injuries the extent of which are not known at this time. And you can see in the background at the top of your screen another of the injured men, believed to be a Secret Service man, that particular man, and then a Washington policeman is also described as having been hit. The seriousness of those injuries not known at this time. President Reagan, whom was described as having been jostled around and bumped a bit, was taken to a hospital just to check him over, but I repeat, the President was not hit by the gunfire, according to the White House. Those of you who saw the early stages of that videotape may have seen the very quick reaction, the almost instant reaction of the Secret Service man who did his job, pushed the President down and actually into the limousine to get him away from the shots that were fired just slightly to the President's right at a range of what is described as about 10 feet. Miraculously, the President was not hit. Unfortunately, 3 other people were hit. Judd Duval and Richard Roth in Washington, I know that you and our whole staff there have been on the telephones while we've been watching a replay of the videotape and talking here. Are there any other details known whatsoever, and do we have anybody at the White House that we can talk to right now?
We're attempting to establish that right now, Dan, and details here from our position are just about as sketchy as they are where you are. We don't know anything yet about the condition of Jim Brady or any of the others who were wounded.
Well, let me say, Richard, if I may interrupt, that according to wire service reports just handed to me, and I emphasize that this is on the basis of wire service reports, that Brady was apparently struck in the head by a bullet. We had mentioned earlier that obviously he had a head wound, but it was unclear as to whether he was actually struck in the head. Note with some interest that the wire service report says that Brady apparently was struck in the head. Sorry for the interruption. Go ahead.
No, I have very little to add. Our Lem Tucker had reported from the scene earlier, Dan, that the number of shots fired were between 3 and 5, and he said that that the people just dropped when the shots were fired, as you saw it, and we haven't yet heard back what the condition of any of those wounded was. Well, the other thing that I do want to mention again is that the First Lady, Nancy Reagan, was not with the President at this speaking engagement. She was not with him when the shooting broke out.
Well, what we have here this afternoon in terms of the President's safety is a miracle, or something near a miracle. At that distance, an estimated 10 feet, 3 shots fired, the President not being hit at that range, a very fortunate thing for him. Unfortunately, Jim Brady, the White House press secretary, is described as having been just ever so slightly behind the President, both of them walking toward the presidential limousine, was struck. Apparently, Jim Brady was struck in the head. He has been taken to a hospital. Reports on his condition unknown. But what a near thing this was outside the Washington Hilton. The President not hit, but at that range, as I say, you have to classify it a miracle or something close to a miracle.
Dan, this is Jed. I think that you can notice from the videotape that what may have saved the President from being hit was the presence of a number of people between him and the gunman, as the camera angle seems to show, with the camera to the rear and to the curb side of the car, and the bullets coming from that general direction along that wall, which I think you're familiar with, outside that entrance to the hotel. A number of people had come out of the hotel entrance with the President and were walking toward their cars. Very few people get in the car with the President. They go to the other cars that are behind him in the motorcade and heading for those cars. They were in the way. They formed a screen, apparently.
This has just been handed to us. It's, I am told from the President's political counselor, Lynn Nofziger, that the President was hit in the left side of the chest, but he is all right. Dan, I do not have anything more on this other than, as I say, to repeat, the President was hit, according to his political counselor, Lynn Nofziger, who was his press spokesman during the campaign, you recall.
And if this is live, this is a person arriving right now, and I think it is a live picture, and the President would have gotten to this hospital sometime before.
But rightly, I know that everyone's concern is, everyone's concern, and rightly so, is for the President's condition. Now, we said earlier that the President was reported to have been unscathed and unhurt. What you have had in the last minute, in the last few seconds, is a change, and that Lynn Nofziger, who is the presidential assistant at the White House, is quoted as saying that the President was struck, or at least grazed. We don't know the extent of it in the area of the chest, but that the President is all right. Now, this is a change from what we were told earlier, that the President might have suffered a lump or two. We'll simply have to wait as time goes along for a full and complete physician's report on the President's condition. And while there is a change, the change now being that the President may have been struck, may have been grazed in the area of the chest, that the President is all right. That's the number one thing to emphasize, that while there has been a change, our first reports were, and very clearly were, that the President had not been struck by the assailant's bullets and had been unscathed. There is a report now that he may have been wounded slightly by this shooting that occurred outside the Washington Hilton. This is frequently the case in the early stages of a story, and I know you can understand it, particularly when you have an attempt on the President's life that there are various reports. However, the reports of eyewitnesses at the scene were unanimous at the time, and as a matter of fact, the early reports from the White House indicated the president had not been struck. But I come back to the one point to be emphasized, and that is that the president is all right if indeed he was struck at all by any of the gunshots, and Lynn Nofsinger of the White House staff now says that Mr. Reagan was struck to the extent that he has a slight wound in the area of his chest. If it turns out that the president was struck with one of the bullets, that it's nothing serious at all, that the president is not in any danger. Now, as for the condition of White House Press Secretary Jim Brady, one of 3 people who clearly were injured by the gun struck, believed to be a Secret Service agent. Jim Brady wounded, 1 Secret Service agent believed to be wounded, and 1 Washington policeman believed to have been wounded. Yes.
If I can interrupt, Richard Roth in Washington. According to reports now, the president, he's official now, the president was hit in the chest during that shooting. He is reported in stable condition at George Washington University Hospital. Once again, we're now seeing the picture as the president waves to the crowd and turns, his left side exposed a little bit to where we believe the gunshots came from. And that's when the shots rang out. We should point out, Jed, did you want to say something?
No, go ahead.
We should point out that Vice President Bush was to be in Texas today. He had 2 speaking engagements in Texas, and we were told, I don't have this confirmed now, but we were told just a moment ago that he is in his plane in the air en route, presumably back to Washington. He also had a speaking engagement tomorrow in Chicago. I think it's safe to assume that the Vice President, though, will be staying in Washington, and that speaking engagement tomorrow will be put off. Once again, I think that we should repeat that reports are now that the president was hit in the chest during that gunfire, but he is in stable condition. Apparently his injury is not too serious. He is in stable condition at George Washington University Hospital. According to Lynn Nofsinger, the president remained conscious, and it is Lynn Nofsinger, the presidential assistant, who describes his condition as stable.
These are other tapes of George Washington University Hospital Center, which is 4 or 5 blocks from the White House, and I guess a good 10 or 12 or more blocks from where the shootings took place. And these are arrivals at the hospital over the past 15 to 30 minutes. I don't know if this is tape.
This is tape.
But it's very important to emphasize that obviously arriving in that ambulance, this is after the president had arrived at George Washington University in his limousine. This is one of, gentlemen in Washington, if you could if you could cue up again the videotape of the actual shooting, perhaps now that some of the dust is beginning to settle from the reports, we should have another look at that and go through that with an eye toward trying to see just exactly when the president was hit. Again, for those of you who may have tuned in just a little late, shortly after 2 o'clock this afternoon, President Reagan, coming out of the Washington Hilton Hotel in Washington, an unidentified assailant, described as a blond young male, fired at least 3 shots, possibly as many as 5, out of the crowd. Although the indications from the White House and from security men early on was the president had not been hit, we're now told by the White House that President Reagan did suffer a wound in the chest, but that he is in stable condition. 3 other people, including the White House Press Secretary Jim Brady, were struck by bullets. Their conditions unknown. This is the president walking out.
The shots will come from right behind the camera, Dan.
Watch closely now.
Mr. President.
The Secret Service man knocks the president into the limousine. A security man pulls his weapon. Another security man cautions him not to fire. The assailant is on the ground on the right. Police and security men swarm over him to hold him down. An officer with his weapon upraised in his right arm upraised, the weapon up high. The presidential limousine sped away and went immediately to George Washington Hospital. Jim Brady, the White House press secretary, here in the middle of your screen, face down on the cement. In the background, either a Secret Service man or another Washington policeman. We believe certainly one of the other wounded. A third person was wounded by the gunfire. From all appearances, Jim Brady, the most seriously wounded of those three, but we emphasize that we are going on the basis of early reports. We never in this videotape get a really good look at the assailant, a security man with the short automatic weapon in his right arm.
You see a blonde head in there right now, Dan. That's all you get to see is a head.
We should emphasize this is the man who is described as the assailant. We do not know in fact that he is.
We're getting some more detail now, Dan, on the President's wounds. Reported conscious, he's in stable condition, wounded in the left side of the chest.
There is every indication that the President's wounds are not serious. I should say that his wound, he has one wound. We have some, we're told that the presidential limousine was hit by some of the bullets. This is videotape of the presidential limousine, and you can clearly see the bullet hole. This is on the right rear side of the presidential limousine. You could see from the early stages of that videotape how that courageous Secret Service man fell on top of President Reagan and pushed him right into the limousine. What we didn't know when we saw that videotape the first time was that the limousine itself had been struck by at least 2 bullets. We could see 2 indentations of bullets.
Dan, you can also see in that videotape another Secret Service agent charging right at our camera, and but not at the camera, at the gunman. And you can see him react as he apparently is hit in the torso. Right after the president, or as the president, is being pushed by the other agent into the car.
Judge DeVal, I wonder if there's a way to slow down that videotape in Washington. It was unclear to me at what point the president would have been hit there. We don't want to overdo this. At the same time, I think it might be of some benefit to take a look at just the early stages of that videotape to see if we can see exactly when the president was hit. There was a point, as we watched it this last time, when I believe that you could see the president wince. It indicated to me that it probably was the time at which he was hit. If we can get that put together,
yes.
We'll come back to it in a few moments. In the meantime, we want to go to the White House and our White House correspondent, Bill Plant. Bill, we understand that the president has been injured slightly with one wound in the area of the chest, but his condition is described as stable. Anything else you can tell us, please?
Dan, that's exactly what we've heard here. The original report, of course, as you've said, was that the president was not hit. That came only moments after we learned of the shooting from our people on the scene. I went back to what's known as the upper press office here, the area in the West Wing where Jim Brady's office is. There was incredible concern, as you can easily believe. We learned then that 3 people had been hit, the Secret Service man, the Washington policeman, and Press Secretary Jim Brady. We were told then that the president had not been hit, apparently on the basis of the fact that people saw him being pushed into the car. Now the White House is saying, as you know, that he was hit, and that is the same report that we have, that it was in the left side of the chest and that his condition is stable. We know that Mrs. Reagan has left the White House for George Washington University Hospital. She is, of course, there by now and presumably with the president, who we are told is conscious and in stable condition. We have no further word on the conditions of the other 3 men who were hit, the Secret Service man, the policeman, and Press Secretary James Brady. And as you have seen in the videotape, the assailant was, or the alleged assailant, captured by policemen on the scene and taken away, is now, we understand, in Secret Service custody. Beyond that, Dan, we can only tell you that, as you yourself know, the situation at the White House at a time like this is one of intense concern, waiting, and on the part of some of the people who were close to those who were hit, tears.
Bill Plant, if you'll stay exactly where you are at the White House, we'll have more in a moment, but in the meantime, we want to pause so that our stations along the line can identify themselves.
You also?
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure that everybody gets that number. That's the studio number.
Oh, okay.
Good afternoon again. Dan Rather, CBS News in Washington, in New York, I should say. In our Washington studios are our correspondents Richard Roth, Jed DeVal, and at the White House, Bill Plant. Also in our Washington studios, just joining us, Lim Tucker, our CBS News correspondent who was an eyewitness to the shooting. Lim, if you could pull yourself together there for just a moment. I know it's been a run for you to the studio. Questions?
I don't have
Dan,
telex.
it's Richard Roth, and let me pass on to to Lem your questions while we get him in a position to be able to hear you. He can't just yet.
Well, I think probably the easiest thing to do, Richard, is for you to do the interview then with Lim right there. I am interested to know whether Lim, at the scene, saw the president struck by the gunfire.
Dan, I want to back off just a little to say saw the president hit is more than anyone, to my recollection, saw there. Later eyewitnesses may emerge. What we saw was the president come out of the side entrance to the main ballroom, perhaps a distance of about 30 feet to his limousine. He started walking there, the smile on his face. I have since that incident, I was fairly certain, since the incident, I've heard a tape recording of the scene at the time. Someone hollers, "Mr. President." The president starts sort of in this position, waving, smiling, and then the shots ring out.
And let me interrupt you for just a moment, Lam and Dan, if I may. According to the latest information we have now, the president did walk into the hospital after the shooting. Lynn Nofziger said that the president apparently didn't immediately realize that he had been wounded, but that a bullet is still lodged in his chest. Nofziger has reportedly said that the president is not at this time in surgery or headed for surgery.
This is the interesting thing, because it appeared that, let me say this, the shots rang out. To my right, there was a brick wall right to the right. The press kept behind a velvet rope. But also mixed into this crowd, a situation that is not too uncommon, a number of bystanders, people from the convention, just people off the streets. The shots rang out. Naturally, everyone, well, some people first hollered firecrackers. And as we sort of moved back and started looking, I looked up, and the president, at this point, you could see Secret Service agents more or less almost grabbing him, appearing to pushing him into the car. At that point, it was the belief that he was not wounded. In talking to several White House people immediately after the car pulled off, they said, no, he was not wounded.
Lem, we're going to look at the videotape again, and you were there, and you can perhaps now tell us what you saw.
At this point, yeah, there is the wave. Those shots are coming just over now behind that person, and you can see the panic. The spot now where they have this man down is where I was standing, along with a number of other press people, but I was almost in that exact spot at the time these shots rang out.
They seem to come from almost over your head then.
Almost over my head or to my side. As a matter of fact, as I ducked down to move back, I was quite aware that this noise had come from my right. And so I ducked down and moved toward my left while trying to see what was at my right. By that point, the efficient police had a man down. You can see them in the upper right-hand corner. Not now. This is one of the wounded. I have been at that scene and traveling here. I'm not sure if, Richard, you have identifications on the others here?
We are told that one was a District of Columbia policeman and that another was a Secret Service agent. We do not have that confirmed. I think the last report from Bill Plant at the White House, though, was that it was a Secret Service agent and a District of Columbia policeman who were also wounded. Well, there clearly it's a policeman. See his uniform.
Pardon me, Richard Roth and Lim Tucker. We're now told that Secret Service agent Tim McCarthy was the agent hit by gunfire. We do not know his condition at the present time, and we do not have the name of the Washington policeman who reportedly was hit.
But Dan, we do now have the name of the man who was arrested, presumably will be charged, the name of the suspect now, John W. Hinckley, Jr. John W. Hinckley, Jr. of Evergreen, Colorado, we are told, is the name of the suspect, and we are also told that he's 22 years old.
He was described by those who got a better look at him than I did there as being late 30s, possibly 40s. Maybe he... At this point, I might add, Dan, while this scene is going on, it has become very obvious to a number of people at that convention what has happened, people who came out to wave goodbye to the president, and they are starting to become quite tearful and upset as the police move through trying to control this crowd.
And we have some more information, this now from the public affairs spokesman of the Secret Service, Jack Warner. The name of the agent who was hurt is Timothy J. McCarthy. He is also at George Washington University Hospital, which we saw just a few moments ago. His wound is in the chest. He is being operated on now, we're told. He is 31 years old, from Chicago, and he joined the Secret Service in Chicago. And once again, the name of the suspect, John W. Hinckley, Jr. of Evergreen, Colorado. The weapon, presumably the weapon that he was carrying, is a 38, we are told, a 38 caliber pistol, I guess that is.
And for those of you who have not seen this before, this is videotape of the scene after the president left the scene. This is Press Secretary Jim Brady at the crime scene on the pavement. Brady reportedly was struck in the head. That is not confirmed. Brady's condition is not known, nor is the condition of Secret Service agent Tim McCarthy, who was also hit, nor is the condition of the Washington policeman reportedly hit. We are told, however, by White House aide Lem Knopfsinger, that while President Reagan was grazed in the left chest, that the president himself didn't realize he had been hit until at or about the time he got to the hospital. That accounts for those early reports saying that the president was unscathed, and while he might have been jostled up a bit and had a bump from being pushed through the heroic efforts of Secret Service agent Jerry Parr, the early reports were that the president had not been struck. Then we were told that the president had indeed been hit, just a slight wound in his chest. Lem Knopfsinger is quoted as saying that the president walked into the hospital, didn't really realize that he had been struck until at or about the time he got to the hospital. The president, we are assured, has not undergone surgery. Lem Knopfsinger is quoted as saying he has not undergone surgery at this time. The policeman, whose identity we do not know, the policeman is now reported to be in critical condition. So if we may, gentlemen, let's pause for one moment and talk about what we know and what we do not know. President Reagan was the target of an assassination attempt outside the Washington Hilton Hotel as the president emerged from making a speech inside the hotel. The president was pushed into his limousine by a bona fide hero, Jerry Parr of the Secret Service, who put himself between the president and the gunman and pushed the president into the limousine. The limousine itself was struck by at least 2 bullets, one in the area of the right door of the limousine, the other the limousine window. 3 persons were injured, White House Press Secretary Jim Brady, a Secret Service man identified as Tim McCarthy, and a Washington policeman. Brady's condition not known at this time. However, it is believed that Brady was struck in the head. Tim McCarthy, the Secret Service man, his condition not known, but the Washington policeman's condition is described as critical. President Reagan is said to have walked into the hospital under his own power, didn't realize that he had been struck, even grazed in the chest, until at or about the time he got to the hospital. The president is reported to be in stable condition, in good condition. The very best information available is that the president's wound is a slight wound, but I emphasize to you that we're in the early stages of reporting this, and while we've had no physician yet speak for the record on the president's condition, that Lem Knopfsinger, the White House aide, says that President Reagan has a slight wound in the area of the chest. The person arrested as a suspect in the shooting has been identified as 22-year-old John Hinckley, Jr. of Evergreen, Colorado. Nothing else is known about him. The number of shots fired, at least 3, possibly as many as 5. The weapon not known at this time, but believed to have been a handgun.
Dan, it's
yes, Richard
Roth in Washington, if I can interrupt for a moment. Lem Tucker just handed me a note saying 6 shots. That's what he had heard. And now we're also told by the Secret Service that they too believe that 6 shots were fired. And we do know a few things more that the weapon apparently used was a .38 caliber revolver, that the suspect taken into custody is a white male, 5 foot 10 inches tall and 22 years old. Lem, when or as soon as the shots broke out, did you hear anyone say anything? Did you hear anything that might have been anything from the crowd behind you?
No, I did not hear anyway. The sort of thing you expect maybe somebody who does that sort of thing might holler out. But nothing was said. The shots rang out. In reflection, several of us were talking in a few minutes before I left the scene. We could even remember what made some people first think it might be firecrackers is you could see this white flash sort of in the area of the sidewalk. Could see some of the Secret Service agents looking down at the sidewalk, and someone first thought they were firecrackers. We heard a tape. I thought earlier there were at least 5 to 6 shots. Since then, we've heard a tape that a radio reporter had running at the time, and very clearly you hear someone say, "Mr. President," and then you can count 6 shots.
The FBI also, we're told, has taken over the investigation, which would be procedurally correct, one supposes, in something like this. They will thus be in charge of, presumably, of what information we get from here on in.
One of the things I might point out that I've never been at a scene quite like that before, but one of the things that certainly seemed eerie was that as these shots rang out, first someone hollered, actually, firecracker, someone very near me, and then there was that, I don't want to be over dramatic about this, but there was really, it seemed to be that suspension of time for ever so brief second. That may have been the period during which a colleague of mine later described the president as the smile leaving his face, and he was just sort of stunned. I suspect, I remember looking up and seeing the tail end of that look on his face.
Pardon me one second, Lem Tucker and Richard Roth, forgive me if you will, live television being what it is. We want to go directly to the White House and our CBS News White House correspondent, Bill Plant. Bill?
Mrs. Reagan is currently with the president at the hospital.
This is obviously a White House spokesman briefing
For your
those in
background,
the White House press room.
we anticipate that press statements, additional press from the hospital site.
This is Dave
I'd like to add
Jurgen.
2 notes. We have been informed by Jim Baker that the president walked into the hospital. I would also like to inform you that in the building as of the moment are the Secretary of State, the Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of Defense, and the Attorney General, as well as other assistants to the President. No, in this building. I'm sorry, we do not. We would like to get that for you as rapidly as possible.
Will the Vice President act as President under these conditions?
No. Because of the delicacy of the situation, we wanted to inform you that the Vice President is on his way back to Washington. I would emphasize once again that the President's condition is stable, and that we were informed by Jim Baker that he did walk into the hospital.
Is he still conscious?
I'm sorry, we simply don't have enough information that is hard at this moment.
Dave, is he conscious, Dave?
Is he conscious?
I'm sorry, I do not know the information on that, so I'm really not able to respond. Let me say this. Let me just emphasize this.
I don't know why they put this riser in.
For your background. The folks at the hospital are obviously closer to this situation on a moment-to-moment basis than we are here. We are obviously in very close communication with them, and we will try to keep you informed here, but that the primary statements we expect will be coming from the hospital, because we feel that they are closer to the facts. Who is there, Dave? Well, as of the moment, in addition to Mrs. Reagan, as I've informed you, and others, Mike Deaver, and as you know, and Dave Fisher were with the President at the time. 4 people went up together, Ed Meese, Jim Baker, and Larry Speaks and Lynn Knopfsiger went together to the hospital. Oh, I'm not sure of the time. The time on these events has run together somewhat. But we will try to keep you posted here as well as we can. I think you all understand the delicacy of the situation. I simply don't want to report facts that we're uncertain of as of the moment. This is really to confirm what has been said from the hospital already.
How serious a wound is it?
David, how serious is
How serious is a wound?
I cannot answer either of those questions. We will, as soon as we get additional information, we will obviously try to help you. I think if you will be patient as the situation demands, we will try to get as much information for you as possible.
Dave, is the president under any summation?
I cannot answer that. I really would like, we wanted to let you know where we were as of the moment. We will try to let you have further information as we can. Thank you very much.
When will the Vice President arrive?
This is Dave Gergen at the White House. What you've just seen live from the White House was Dave Gergen briefing reporters there, including our own CBS correspondent Bill Plant, and we'll be back with Bill Plant in just a moment. But first we want to go to a videotape of White House aide Lynn Knopfsinger at George Washington Hospital, where President Reagan has been taken.
We have this information. The President was shot once in the left chest. The bullet entered from the left side. He is conscious. He is in stable condition. And that literally is all I can tell you at this time.
President?
The President.
Was anybody else shot?
Off the wires, I understand 3 people were shot, including Jim Brady, the press secretary. I do not know how serious that wound is. I have no information on the state of the condition of the other persons who were shot.
Are they here?
Yes, they're all here.
Was the president's heart endangered by this shot?
No.
Is the bullet still in his body?
Yes. No, I didn't say that. We answer one question at a time. At this moment, he is not undergoing surgery. I don't know whether he will.
Is he conscious?
What?
Is he conscious?
Yes, he is conscious. As far as I know, the bullet is in him.
Any Secret Service wounded?
I can't answer those questions because I wasn't there. But there were apparently 3 persons shot, and all I know on that is what I heard, what I got off the wire.
Is that in
the President and 3 others?
I can't answer that. I was not there. You're going to have to get that
in addition to
issue.
the President?
What?
3 in addition to the President?
Yes.
Hey, Lynn. Who was the assailant?
I do not know.
Was Jim Brady there?
Yes.
How was the president when he went into the hospital? What was his condition then? Was he talking to people?
Yes.
Did he seem seriously injured? Was he?
Obviously, a wound in the chest is a serious wound.
Did he walk in?
Yes. That is all the information I've got. We will come out. We will try to keep you informed as we progress. We will try to set up a press room here. We will have a press person on hand here. We will keep you informed. Frankly, I just don't know a hell of a lot right now.
Hey, Lynn, why were the...
What? Certainly.
Why did the initial report say that the president had not been hit?
Well, because the president apparently did not know that he had been shot at that time.
Did not know?
They did apprehend the source of the shooting?
I cannot answer that. All I know is what I heard on the wires, which is that he had. Okay, we'll get back to you later. Thank you.
Lynn Knopfsinger, that was on videotape just a few minutes ago. Lynn Knopfsinger, White House press aide at George Washington Hospital. Should emphasize that the thrust of what Mr. Knopfsinger is saying is that the president, while he does have a wound in his chest, he is talking, he is awake and alert. As Lynn Knopfsinger said, anytime you have a wound in the chest area, and this is quoting Mr. Knopfsinger, you have to consider it serious. But the president walked into the hospital under his own power and has been conscious straight the way through. For those of you who are asking, well, why weren't we told in the beginning that the president had indeed been shot? The answer apparently is that a White House aide at the scene, Carna Small, at any rate, had said that it was her understanding, this was a White House press spokesman, the president had not been hit. Eyewitnesses at the scene said they did not believe the president had been hit. You just heard Mr. Knopfsinger say that his only explanation was that the president himself didn't realize that he had been struck until at or about the time he got to the hospital. All of that can be sorted out later. The situation at the moment, President Reagan is at George Washington Hospital. From all indications, from all reports, including what you've just seen from Mr. Knopfsinger, he is all right. A Washington policeman who has not yet been identified is listed as being in critical condition. Secret Service agent identified as Tim McCarthy, who was also struck his condition unknown. White House Press Secretary Jim Brady has also been taken to the hospital with a head wound. Jim Brady's condition said to be unknown. At the White House now is our White House correspondent, Bill Plant. And Bill, I want to ask you that UPI has just moved a story quoting an unnamed White House aide as saying, in regards to Press Secretary Brady, quote, "It doesn't look good." Now, do you know anything about that?
Dan, we don't. We haven't heard anything at all about Brady's condition, and I haven't been back to hear. We hope that that is not the case. One thing, Dan, that we should emphasize that we may have missed when we heard Staff Director David Gergen out here a moment ago, we were told that a decision is now being made on whether to operate on the president to remove the bullet from his left side. So it's plain that the bullet is lodged in the president's body. A decision is now being made, we're told, on whether to operate. Gergen also told us that Vice President Bush is on his way back to the city and that the Secretaries of State, Treasury, Defense, and the Attorney General are here in the White House. This was the beginning of David Gergen's statement a few moments ago in the White House briefing room.
Bill, that comes as news that they're now making a decision. Let's hear what Mr. Gergen has to say.
The statements made at George Washington Hospital that the president was shot once in the left side this afternoon as he left the hotel. His condition is stable. A decision is now being made whether or not to operate to remove the bullet. The White House and the Vice President are in communication, and the Vice President is now en route to Washington. He is expected to arrive in the city this afternoon. Mrs. Reagan is currently with the President at the hospital.
Dan, we must tell you that that David Gergen was asked at that briefing a few moments ago whether the Vice President would now act as President. His answer was no. For the time being, Vice President Bush, who is on his way back to Washington, will not be acting as President. The President's condition, as you heard, was described as stable. He was described as conscious. A decision is now being made on whether to operate on that bullet which is lodged in the left side of his chest, apparently. We heard on the Lynn Nofziger tape, someone asked Nofziger if the President's heart had been endangered, and Nofziger appeared to answer no to that question, but that is all we know. For the moment, Vice President Bush on his way back here, the Secretary of State, Alexander Haig, the Secretary of the Treasury, Donald Reagan, the Secretary of Defense, Caspar Weinberger, and the Attorney General, William French Smith, all here at the White House, and we're awaiting further word. Dan?
Bill, I think it's important we keep coming back to the best available information that we have. The best available information that we have is that the President walked into the hospital under his own power, that the President has been conversing with various people while he has been in the hospital, that Lynn Nofziger, the ranking White House spokesman who's had anything to say on this subject, has said that while any time you have a gun wound in the area of the chest, you have to consider it serious, that Mr. Nofzinger's general feeling, general impression was that the President was not badly wounded. This is a new angle of the shooting scene. We've not seen this videotape before. This was taken with another camera. Let's watch. The President has already been hustled into his limousine by this time. The police are wrestling with the assailant. Now this from another angle. This is the scene immediately after the President's limousine, which was struck by at least 2 bullets, had pulled away.
Everybody's back! Give me a car! Get back! Give me a car! Give me a car! Everybody's back! Get back inside! Give me a car! car. Come on, guys, give us some. Go, give me that 38. We gotta get Scout Kobe. Get in. Look, fellas, clear the area, please, so we can get a unit in. Right up there. Jacobson. Please, don't touch it. Don't touch it. Somebody get a handkerchief. Get a handkerchief. Yeah, we got one. Bring that unit. Give me that mark. Get out of the way. Come on, fellas. Keep the area clear so we can get come on. Please, keep it clear so we get the ambulance. Come on, guys. Stay here. Get back. Get back. Well, here's one right here. Got his shot now. He's gone. Get him behind his shot. Get out of the way. Get out of here.
This is the suspected assailant being hustled into a police car. What you just saw was a videotape of the shooting scene in the early part of this afternoon, Washington time, outside the Washington Hilton Hotel, after an assailant took at least 3 shots and possibly as many as 6. The latest indication from the Secret Service is that possibly 6 shots were fired. What you just saw at the end of that videotape, which was a different angle and lasted a bit longer than what we had earlier in the afternoon, was the suspected assailant, identified as 22-year-old John Hinckley Jr. of Evergreen, Colorado, being put in a patrol car and taken to Washington. If you were wondering why that Secret Service man was out front and had that automatic weapon at the ready, that was to protect the assailant. As strange as it may seem, and it may strike some as strange, why would you want to protect the assailant? If you think about it, I think the answer is fairly obvious, that no one wanted an attack on the assailant, and that Secret Service man was protecting him at the time. All of that within minutes after the president had been shot. Now, President Reagan has been wounded by a bullet which is said to have entered from just under his left arm. It's a chest wound. The president walked into the hospital under his own power and is said to have been conversing with people inside the hospital. We're told by the White House that a decision is being made now as to whether to operate on President Reagan or not. No further details given. 3 other persons injured. White House Press Secretary Jim Brady. Brady's condition not known and not given out by the hospital as yet. One unidentified White House aide, quoted by United Press International as saying in connection with Mr. Brady, quote, "It does not look good," unquote. The Secret Service agent who was injured, Tim McCarthy, is the identification given to us. We have no information on his condition. A Washington policeman is said to have been injured. His condition is said to be critical. The identification on that policeman, I repeat for emphasis, is not yet being given out. Right now, Bob Shackney is at George Washington University Hospital in Washington. Bob, what is new there at the hospital?
The information that we have here outside the emergency room was given to us by a variety of White House officials. President Reagan has been shot in the chest. The bullet entered his chest from under his left arm. He is described as being conscious and in stable condition. That's all the information we have. White House spokesman Larry Speake said he could not go beyond that. He would not say, apparently may not know, whether the president will have to undergo surgery. Apparently, when we last heard from Larry Speake, the bullet was still inside President Reagan's body. Mrs. Reagan arrived here somewhat earlier, looking very worried. The president's car shows signs of bullets striking it. 3 cracks along one of the rear windows and a hole that possibly was made by a bullet. Richard. We're told that the president was injured, that his press secretary, Jim Brady, suffered a head wound, that a Secret Serviceman was wounded, and that a policeman was wounded. White House spokesmen say they're trying to set up a more formal press room so that we can be briefed about every half hour on the condition of the president. To repeat, the latest information we have from White House spokesman Larry Speake is that President Reagan has been shot in the left chest, the bullet entering from under his left arm, that he is conscious, and that he is in stable condition. Robert Shackney, CBS News, outside the emergency room at George Washington Hospital.
Thank you very much, Bob Shackney, and we'll be staying in touch with you throughout the afternoon, as we will with Bill Plant, our CBS News correspondent, with whom we've been talking at the White House in our Washington studios, Richard Roth, Judd Duval, and an eyewitness to the shooting, Lem Tucker. President Reagan at George Washington Hospital, his condition said to be stable. The president has a wound, at least a slight wound, in his chest. Lynn Knopfsinger, a White House aide who has been at the hospital from almost the moment President Reagan arrived, said, in something we quoted to you before, but come back to, Lynn Knopfsinger says, well, any wound in the chest would have to be considered serious. But Knopfsinger went on to emphasize that the president had walked into the hospital under his own power and had been talking to people inside the hospital. Lem Tucker, who was an eyewitness to the shooting, is in our Washington studios. Lem, the president had gone to the Washington Hilton Hotel to make a speech to a group of labor leaders, had he not?
Yes, Dan, and that reminds me of something. As I left, when I had just a moment before I ran to the car, someone from there asked, well, we'll get back to that. The president's now leaving what's a private entrance for VIPs. The press is just in front of him. There you see that the president, well, I witnessed that the smile sort of left his face, but he was literally pushed into the car, which could explain why no one, eyewitnesses and maybe not the people there in the car, realized at first that the president had been shot. The press at this point, several cameramen, there's Michael Deaver right there in the, just crouching down to the left there, running around the car. Now what you're seeing is the area where just seconds before we had been standing. I was standing about where the officer to the far right now is. There was a barricade, a gold velvet rope, which you will see here shortly, where the press had been kept. But let me emphasize, this was not what we call a secure press area. In this same area, there were just citizens passing by. They had been there when we went in, some of them. The crowd swelled during the half an hour or so that the president was in giving his speech, so it was rather large by this time. And they were mixed in, even up to the front ranks, with the press. I believe, Dan, that the shots came from what would have been to my right and maybe just behind me. There was only one person, to my recollection, because I had been complaining about not enough room there because there were so many civilians. One person between me and the wall. And we were standing just about now where they have the alleged assailant. Initially, there was just sort of a